The very first thing for microeconomics is that the concept of demand. Okay, so demand. Now, what is demand basically? It's not just something that you and me desire. Okay, it's not like, okay, I really want, like this car and that's it. That's not demand. So, demand has certain characteristics which need to be fulfilled to call it a demand. First thing for sure is that you need to have a desire for it. You should want that commodity. You should need that commodity for some reason or the other, right? There should be that desire in that commodity. The second aspect is that there should be the willingness to purchase the commodity. For example, if I would say like, okay, I like an Audi, right? The desire, okay, but do I have the willingness to purchase it? I don't think so. The car is good, it's good looking, but no, I don't want to spend so much on it, right? So if my willingness is not there, I will not call it that demand. I will not call it demand. Okay, so willingness to purchase that commodity should be there. Willingness to spend on that commodity should be there, right? Another thing is ability to pay. Now, ability to pay is like you should have that purchasing power capacity. Okay, so for example, if I say that, okay, I like the house Antilla, right? But do I have the ability to pay? No, right? I don't have the ability to pay. So that will not be a demand. That will just restrict my desire. That's it, right? So ability to pay means the consumer should have that purchasing power, right? Then is the price of the commodity, right? So if the price is high, definitely I won't like to buy a commodity. But if the price is low, I can think about it, right? So price of the commodity and time to consume the commodity, it is very important. It's not like, for example, if I say 10 years down the line, I would want to own a house. So my demand for a house is not there at present. It won't be called a demand at present, right? What I want 10 or 15 years down the line will not be called a demand. So time to consume that commodity is very important. So if the time is somewhere near, right, to consume it, only then it will be called a demand. So there should be a desire, there should be a willingness, there should be an ability to purchase a commodity. The price of the commodity and the time to consume a commodity reflects the demand. If all these things are there collectively, only then it will be called demand, right? Otherwise, no. Even one of the aspect is missing from our concept, our consumption. If any one of the concept is missing, we won't call it demand. No, right? So important, these characteristics. Okay. Then the concept of demand. You need to remember this, that it was given by Alfred Marshall in his book Principles of Economics, right? Another thing which you need to focus on is that your demand is a flow concept. It is consumed over a period of time, right? There is a continuous consumption going on, right? For example, if you buy a car, you don't buy it for today, right? You want to consume it over a period of time, right? So you would need a car over a period of time, say for commuting to your offices or colleges and so on, right? So the consumption is spread over a period of time. And that is why demand is a flow concept. And this consumption is, like it can be a few minutes, it can be a month, it can be a few years, but it is there. Okay, so that is why we call demand a flow concept, because it is consumed over a period of time. So if you're going in for this UGC course, you're going to consume it over a period of 3 to 4 months, right? You're going to need it for a period of 3 to 4 months. And that is why this is a flow concept, right? Anything? Are you okay with the pace? Okay. Any query? Okay. Right. Now, once we've decided or once we've determined what the demand is, now what is a demand function? Now it is just reflecting onto the relationship between the quantity that is demanded with other factors that determine the demand. Now, what are the other factors determining the demand? First is the price of your own good. Okay, now price of the own good. Obviously, if a price is high, you would be demanding less of it, right? So there is an inverse relationship, a negative relationship between your price and the quantity demanded. That is, a high price would lead to a low quantity demanded. Okay, so negative relationship with the demand. So this is first aspect that affects the demand. Second is your income of the consumer, right? Now, if your income increases, your demand increases. Obviously, you would tend to buy more of it. Let's take the example of a poor labor, right? So, firstly, he was just able to afford one meal a day, right? But when the income increased, now he can afford 2 meals a day, right? So, with an increase in income, the demand for the meals is increasing, right? And when income and demand go in the same direction, upward or downward, right? We call it, it is a case of a normal good, right? But there are certain goods, for which when income increases, you tend to consume the less of it, right? So for example, like let's just take the example of some auto rides, right? Or some public transport. Right now, I'm not talking about the metropolitan cities where it would be rational to go in for public transport, but just in general, in a city where there's less population and so on. So when the income increases, a person tends to, move away from the public transport to a private transport, right? So the demand for public transport falls. So when there is this inverse relationship that is determined, that is, with a rise in income, your demand is following, then in that case, the good is an inferior good, right? So in case of income of the consumer, you have a normal good and you have an inferior good, right? The third factor that affects demand is your price of related goods. It can be substitute or it can be complements. Now, substitute goods. Substitute goods are those which are consumed in place of, right? Substituted. For example, Coke and Pepsi. They are the perfect examples of substitute goods, right? So, if price of Coke increases, the demand for Coke would fall, but the demand for Pepsi would increase. So there is this positive relationship that is determined. And when there is a positive relationship that is determined, it is a substitute good, right? So another thing is in case of complementary goods, while substitute goods are consumed in place of, complementary goods are consumed together. Car and petrol. Okay. So if say, for example, price of car increases, your demand for car falls, and as a result, the demand for petrol also falls. So there is an inverse relationship that is determined. And when there is this inverse relationship, it is a case of complementary goods. So please remember that in case of substitute goods, a positive relationship is there. And in case of complementary goods, a negative relationship is there. Okay. Then Fourth factor is your tastes and preferences. Now, tastes and preferences can be like, we'll be doing it in the following, lectures, that we'll be talking about the bandwagon effect. We will be talking about Veblen goods, and then snob effect, and so on, right? So if the tastes and preferences, they change in favor of the consumer, right, then the demand will increase. If tastes and preferences are favorable, for example, if everybody is buying an iPhone, so even you will start demanding an iPhone, right? So the demand for an iPhone would increase, right? But if the tastes and preferences are unfavorable, then in that case, the demand falls. For example, a person who loves collecting antique goods, right? He or she wants to stay that, maintain that idea of exclusivity. Okay, so he wants to stay exclusive. So if everybody is buying or everybody has a painting of Mona Lisa in there, that person would not have any charm about it. And as a result, the demand will fall, right? So tastes and preferences, if favorable, they will increase the demand, and if unfavorable, they will decrease the demand. Okay. Fifth is your advertisement outlay. Now, more the advertisement expenses, if you increase the advertisement expenses, right, that would mean that there will be more visibility to the consumer. The consumer would know about the product. And as a result, the demand will increase. That's why big companies spend a humongous amount on your advertisements. You should see the newspaper. Just get hold of a newspaper these days. The front page is surely an advertisement. These days, the front page is always an advertisement, and there's no front page news, but just an advertisement, right? So, higher the advertisement expenditure by the firm, the more demand it will generate. Okay. Then is your future expectation about a price. Now, if you expect the prices to rise in future, if you think that prices would rise in future, your demand at present would increase. I don't know if you've experienced this, right? There was this thing. Now the prices of petrol and diesel, they have been regulated. But there was a time when they used to inform one day in advance, especially at night, at around 7 or 8 at night. They used to inform that petrol prices are going to increase tomorrow, right? As a result, what happened was there were huge, lengthy lines at a petrol pump just to get their tanks filled. Okay, so they were expecting, they were hoping, or they were foreseeing that the prices would increase the next day. So as a result, their demand at present increased. Okay. And then number of customers in the market, right? So more the consumers, definitely more will be the demand. And that's why the Indian market is so lucrative, right? So appealing for the MNCs and for the foreign industries, because there are definitely more consumers in this market, which can generate the demand, right? No wonder L'Oreal hires Indian ambassadors, right? So just to appeal to the local market and just to generate that demand in the Indian market. Okay. Now, any problem, anything till here? Anything you would like to share about your demand experience or anything? Come on, let's be interactive. Yes. Is this one shy group? yes, this material is more than enough, right? Because it has been prepared comprehensively and like you would find everything here. The only thing is why I'm asking you to go in for Pratyogita Darpan is because, see, the book has been published, like there is a lag, obviously, right? So just to update yourself with current data or, new schemes and everything, though it is there in the material, there's a nice lengthy section of Indian economy in this study material, but still just to keep you updated. And basically, my objective of making you read Pratyogita Darpan is to give you that confidence that yes, you've studied and you know stuff. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Now, while we've understood the determinants that affect demand, let's now define the law of demand. Okay. Now you have to keep a note of two important things. First is the case of Alfred Marshall. It was given by Alfred Marshall. They do ask sometimes. Another thing is that it is a partial equilibrium analysis. Law of demand is a partial equilibrium analysis. Can somebody tell me why? No, no, no. We are not talking about the supply. No, no, not because of that. So why it is a partial equilibrium analysis? A partial equilibrium model basically talks about one dependent variable and one independent variable, and it considers all other variables as constant, right? Same is the case for law of demand. Law of demand will only understand or depict a relationship between price and quantity demanded, right? Keeping other things as constant. We are not going to talk about changes in income, changes in prices of related goods, and so on in case of law of demand. In case of law of demand, we are only going to state that there is an inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and the quantity demanded of it, other things kept constant. Okay, that's why, because of this very reason, your law of demand is considered to be a partial equilibrium analysis. Okay. Now, this law of demand can be represented in two ways. First is your demand schedule. It is nothing but a tabular presentation of the law of demand, right? So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, these are the prices. At price 5, quantity demanded is 2. At price 4, quantity demanded is 4. At price 3, 6 is the quantity demanded. At 2, 8 is the quantity demanded. And 1, 10 is the quantity demand. So it is just the tabular presentation of the law of demand. And if you can see, as the price is falling, your quantity demanded is rising, thus validating the law of demand. On the other hand, your demand curve is a graphical presentation of the law of demand, right? So here, even in the table, we are seeing that there is an inverse relationship that is there between price and quantity demanded. And that is why the curve is a downward sloping curve. Okay. Now, one thing you need to note here is that your demand and supply, demand curve and demand schedule, they will not tell you about the prevailing market prices. They're not concerned with it, right? The only thing they're concerned with is providing you with the information that at this particular price, this will be the quantity demanded. This price, this will be the quantity demanded, and so on. They are not setting a price. They are not setting a quantity demanded. They're just telling you that what are the different possibilities we have. What are the different combinations of price and quantity demanded? Okay, so that's what the law of demand tells you. Okay. Another thing is, now this was the individual demand, right? We're just talking about one particular individual. Okay, but in case of market demand, it will be summing up of quantity demanded of all the individuals together, right? And that is why we say that it is a horizontal summation. Very important. Please keep a note of it, that market demand curve or market demand basically is the horizontal summation of individual demands. It is not a vertical summation. It is just the horizontal summation. Okay, that you add the quantity or the variable that is there on the x-axis. Whenever we add the variable that is on the x-axis, we are adding the quantities to get the market demand, right? So whenever we add the variable on the x-axis, we get a horizontal summation. Okay, so market demand is the horizontal summation. And larger the population, more will be the market demand. That's very obvious for it. Okay, another thing is that it will be a flatter curve as compared to your individual demand curve. Because, for example, quantity demanded for individual here is 2, right, at price 5. So if we add up the, individual demands, probably it would be, say, 5 or 6. So the curve will automatically be flatter than the individual demand curve. Okay. Right? Any query till here? Okay. Right. Now, as a layperson, we would say that, okay, we've got this, that demand curve is downward sloping, and there is an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. But the question is, why? Why is it? Why is there an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded? It's not just that we have, Marshall just came up with this view that, okay, one day he just got up and said, there's an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. But definitely, when he came up with this view, there were some logical reasons behind it. So what were the reasons? First is the law of diminishing marginal utility, right? So law of diminishing marginal utility is that as you consume more and more of a commodity, right, the marginal utility derived from it keeps on falling. You were very hungry, very, very hungry. So the first bowl of Maggi gave you a lot of content. That gave you really high utility, right? But then you are offered a second bowl of Maggi. You were very happy, right? That give you further content. Okay. Then you were offered a third bowl of Maggi. Okay, you can still have that. Fine. It was tasty. Fine. But I'm not that hungry. But then you were given a fourth bowl of Maggi again. And you say, stop. I don't want it anymore. Right? I just don't want that. So why? Why did you stop here? Because your marginal utility was falling with each consecutive bowl of Maggi consumed. Okay. And when, like, for example, like the more utility you derive from it, the higher is the price you're willing to pay for that commodity. And less utility you derive from it, the lesser is the price. So probably when you are very hungry, right, very, very hungry, in a cold place, you are willing to pay, say, rupees 40 for the Maggi, right? But at your fourth bowl, I don't think you will be willing to pay the same price of 40 rupees for the same bowl of Maggi. No, you would rather tend to skip it. Okay. So for each consecutive unit consumed, your marginal utility falls. And as a result, the price or the willingness to pay for that commodity also falls, right? And because of this law of diminishing marginal utility, there is an inverse relationship that is determined between price and quantity demanded. Okay? A thumbs up? Good with this? Thank you. Okay, right. Now, next is your income effect. Okay. Now, income effect is, for example, we are not talking about the nominal income here, right? So, for example, you've got a pocket money of, say, rupees 1,000, right? And there's a commodity which you would like to consume, which costs rupees 100. Okay. So, where 1,000 is your nominal income, right? We are just going to talk about real income now, right? So real income would be nothing but nominal income divided by price. Okay, nominal income divided by price of the commodity will give you the real income. Now here, the real income would be 1,000 divided by 100, which will be equal to 10 units. So 10 units is your real income here. Okay. Now, for example, the price of the commodity falls. It falls to 50, right? So where 10 was your initial real income, with a fall in price of commodity to 50, now you can consume 20 units of the commodity. Okay, so now with a rise in real income, there is a rise in the purchasing power. So as a result, the demand would increase. So please remember that the income effect, right? Income effect, which we talk about here, would be a real income. We are not talking about your nominal income. We are talking about the real income. The real income in the sense that what is the purchasing power capacity. Okay. So this is the thing. With a fall in price, ultimately this inverse relationship is developed. With a fall in price, there is an increase in demand. Okay. And the law of demand is established. Another thing is, now the next factor is your substitution effect. Right? Now, substitution effect is, in this case, we are going to talk about your relative income. Okay, so probably Y, assume that Y is your substitute good. Okay, now if the price of Y say increases, the denominator is increasing here, and as a result, this ratio would fall. Now, a fall in this ratio implies that X is cheaper now, right? And as a result, the demand for X would increase. Okay, so in case of substitution effect, we talk about the relative prices, right? We don't take the individual prices alone, but we take the relative prices here. So if a price of your substitute good increases, then your relative price would fall. That is your commodity. The commodity X becomes cheaper, and as a result, your demand increases. And hence, an inverse relationship is established. Okay. Fourth aspect, the different uses of a commodity, right? So if the price of a commodity, it falls, right? It can be put, this commodity, a cheaper price of a commodity can induce the consumer to put that commodity to different uses. So for example, the example of carrots here, right? The prices of carrots reduce a lot significantly in your winters, okay, especially in the months of December and January. As a result, people are making gajar ka halwa, people are making gajar kheer, people are making, the vegetable, people are making unlimited amount of things from that carrot. Okay, so as a result, the carrot which we consumed, say for example, we just consumed 1 kg per week. Now, with the reduced price, we are putting it to different uses, and as a result, the quantity demanded of it increases. So, another thing is that with the fall in price, the commodity can be put to different uses, which ultimately increases the demand. Okay. And then is the size of the market. Obviously, when the price falls, people are lured to purchase. So, for example, the Diwali bonuses, right? The Diwali schemes, there are so many schemes on electronics that people are actually attracted to buy that. The Great Indian Amazon Festival or Indian Sale, I don't know, right? So people are actually attracted to buy more during that period just because of the fall in price, which ultimately increases the demand. Okay? Right? Anything till here? Okay. Now, what are the exceptions? But while we are always talking about an inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, there are certain goods which do not, go with the assumptions of the law of demand, which just violate the rules of law of demand. And what are those exceptions? First is your Veblen effect, the concept of conspicuous consumption. That is the prestige value that is attached to the price, right? For example, a person is going in, he's buying a Rolls Royce, a person is buying an expensive car for it, right? There are four wheels to it. There are 5 people who can travel in that. It uses the same petrol. It has an AC as well. Everything is the same. But why do you need to buy an expensive car? Just because of the prestige value that is attached to it. And that is the case of a Veblen effect. right? Because people would see that, people would highlight it, you would stand away from the crowd, right? And that's what Veblen pointed out, that there is a case of conspicuous consumption here, right? These days, if you see, there is a lot of trend of lab grown diamonds, right? But people who are willing to spend 10 times the price of the lab grown diamonds on mined diamonds means they have this, they are showing the Veblen effect just because they want to stand out from that crowd. Okay. So Veblen effect does not follow the principles of the law of demand. According to this, higher the price, it will be more appealing for this crowd that is going in for conspicuous consumption. Please note down these words: conspicuous consumption, the prestige value given by Thorsten Veblen. These are the important words here. Okay. Then the second is the Giffen goods, right? Now, Giffen goods also show a positive relationship where we are talking about the Veblen effect is for exclusive products. Giffen goods, it shows a positive relationship between price and quantity demanded. This is mainly for inferior goods, right? So it was basically in that era, like for example, like how did this concept emerge was that during the British time, right, the British wars, right? So the army people, right, they were not able to afford like everything for their nutrition. So we took this example that the two things that they consumed were bread and meat. Okay, so meat was a normal good and bread was considered as an inferior good, right? So what happened was that a combination of the two of them, they needed it to meet their minimum nutritional needs. So they were living a hand to mouth kind of a situation. They didn't have any savings. And that's how, like, it was just that they were just barely living. Okay. Now, what happened was that the price of bread increased. So they actually demanded a limited number of bread to meet their minimum nutritional requirement. They wanted that, right? So a high price actually extracted a larger portion from their expenditure, right? From their budget, right? And they were left with lesser amount which was not enough to meet or which was not enough to purchase meat. So what happened was the leftover budget they also spent it on bread. So what happened, they consumed firstly the minimum level of bread which they needed plus the extra budget. They extracted the budget from meat and spent it on bread. So what happened was that with the rise in price of bread, the demand for bread increased. And this is how the concept of Giffen goods emerged, right? And this Giffen goods shows a positive relationship between your price and quantity demanded, depicting an upward sloping demand. Okay. Now, one thing which is very important here and which we'll be doing it in future as well, that you need to remember that all Giffen goods are inferior goods. All Giffen goods are inferior goods. That is, they will depict a positive relationship between price and quantity demanded, and they will also depict a negative relationship between income and quantity demanded. These two conditions are satisfied in case of a Giffen good, but not all inferior goods are Giffen goods. Okay, in the sense that all inferior goods, the remaining portion, would satisfy this requirement, that is an increase in income leading to a fall in demand, but they will definitely follow the law of demand as well. That is the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded. So the light green portion is violating the law of demand and is an inferior good, showing an inverse relationship between income and quantity demanded. And the darker green version is going with the law of demand. It is actually accepting the conditions of law of demand, but it is following the condition that a rise in income will lead to a fall in quantity demanded. Okay. Then the third exception is ignorance on the part of the buyer or consumer, that a consumer is ignorant, about the prevailing market prices, right? So that's why he can go and buy a commodity at a high price, right? And then the expectations, again, if the prices are expected to rise in future, the quantity demanded at present will increase. There is a possibility that the prices may not rise, rather the prices may fall in future. But if the prices are expected to rise in future, the consumer would feel that it is best to buy it right now. And the fifth reason is the war. In times of war, people are willing to pay high prices for a commodity. Okay? Any problem, anything till here? Anything?